What if every system in the multiverse had a single creator? Reborn into a ruthless cultivation world as a forgotten orphan, Chen awakens the legendary Prime Source system. While others seek power, he secretly creates it, crafting divine weapons, legendary pills, and treasures that can change worlds. This is the Multiverse's Supplier. I am the Prime Source. Title: The Multiverse's Supplier. I am the Prime Source. Chapter 1: The Garbage Boy and the Genesis Pack. The winters in the northern peaks of the Azure Mist sect did not care for the marrow of 5-year-old orphans. Chen's fingers were the color of bruised plums, cracked at the knuckles and leaking a thin, watery pink fluid that froze almost as soon as it touched the rough flagstones. He didn't cry. Crying required breath, and breath was a luxury when you were hauling a wooden bucket of nitsil 3 times your own weight up the 700 stairs of the outer gate supply depots. Move it, little ghost. If the low-grade fertilizer isn't in the south garden by sunrise, the herb ward overseer will skin you to make a drum. A heavy leather-soled boot caught Chen square between his shoulder blades. The force sent his small, malnourished frame sprawling into the gray slush. The wooden bucket wobbled, splashing a foul, frozen stench across his threadbare hemp robe, a garment so thin it felt less like cloth and more like cheesecloth against the biting mountain wind. The older servant boy who had kicked him didn't even look back, casually whistling as he walked toward the warmth of the servant barracks. Chen remained in the snow for a long breath, staring at his reflection in a patch of black ice. He had been in this world for exactly 5 years, having reincarnated after a catastrophic industrial boiler explosion on Earth had vaporized his adult body. He had retained his modern mind, but in a world where immortal cultivators flew on swords and parted rivers with a wave of their sleeves, an orphan with a common, muddy 3-element common root was lower than the dirt beneath their boots. He was a background prop, a non-entity destined to die of exhaustion before his 15th winter. Just 5 more stairs, Chen told himself, his jaw clenching until his teeth scraped. Just stand up. He gripped the icy rope handle of the bucket, his tiny lungs burning like he was inhaling broken glass. He pulled himself up, his muscles trembling violently. Suddenly, a sound resonated, not in his ears, but directly inside the gray matter of his soul. It was a cold, grand, and terrifyingly absolute sound, like the striking of an ancient bronze bell at the dawn of creation. Ding! The absolute coordinates of the host have stabilized. Chronological age requirement met, 5 years old. Scanning local reality anchor. Anchor verified. Cultivation World 9042. The unique, boundless, and unreplicated artifact of the Grand Void has successfully booted. Host Chen, welcome to the Prime Source System. Chen froze, a half-lifted bucket trembling in his hands. A glowing, monochromatic interface, completely invisible to the passing outer disciples, flashed open across his vision. Unlike the complex, chatty AI interfaces he had read about in modern web novels, this screen carried an air of heavy, mechanical finality. Core directive notification. This system does not possess the authority of God. This system cannot create matter from nothing. 0 right arrow 1. All rewards, items, and structures distributed by the myriad subsidiary systems across the great multiverse, sign-in systems, gacha systems, sect systems, must be drawn from physical stock. Host Chen has been designated as the primordial artisan / the supplier. Your labor will form the bedrock of the multiverse's central warehouse. You manufacture the master copies. In exchange, the system will refine your existence. Before Chen could even process the reality of the words, a second, brilliant gold prompt overrode the gray screen. Newbie integration package detected. Activating the Prime Source Starter, pack to ensure host survival during Phase 1 extraction. Item 1, extracting Heavenly Primordial Root, mutated from 3-element common root, modifying meridian structures. Chen gasped, but no sound left his throat. A sudden white-hot heat erupted directly in his lower abdomen, right where his dantian resided. The sluggish, muddy channels that had previously refused to hold even a shred of the world's spiritual energy were violently torn open. It didn't feel like a gentle upgrade. It felt like a roaring river of molten silver was being forced through straws. His common root shattered, and in its place, a pristine, singular, iridescent channel formed, connecting his physical body directly to the cosmic background energy of the universe. Item 2. Integrating myriad invention sovereign physique, aligning bone density and muscle memory parameters. His spine popped in a rapid, rhythmic succession. The agonizing ache in his small joints vanished, replaced by a strange, heavy density. His small frame didn't grow larger, but his muscles tightened, his center of gravity shifting until his stance became as unyielding as an ancient mountain. His eyes grew sharper, instantly understanding the exact mechanical stress points of the wooden bucket in his hands, knowing precisely how to lift it with zero wasted energy. Item 3. Depositing 9 flawless flesh-forging pills to system storage. Item 4. Depositing 1,000 primordial spirit stones, untampered raw energy base. Item 5. Bound tool registered. The Genesis pickaxe growth type currently Tier 1. The interface flickered rapidly, the gold light shifting into an ominous, deep crimson. Warning, first mandatory production task is now due. The central warehouse requires stock calibration. Task 1, raw ore cultivation and extraction. Target planet, Primal Realm 09, dead asteroid core, high gravity, oxygen deficient. Quota required for replication engine. 5 million lower grade spirit stones, 1 million middle grade, 100,000 high grade, 1,000 top grade. Time allotted, 5 years subjective primal time. Real world time dilation, 1:100 ratio, approximately 18 days will pass in the Azure Mist Sect. Initiating physical and spiritual relocation. Deploying sliver consciousness projection to occupy the host's current identity during absence. Chen's vision suddenly blurred. The snowy steps of the Azure Mist Sect began to dissolve into streaks of gray and white light. He looked down and saw his own hand, but it was slightly translucent. Beside him, a perfect physical replica of his 5-year-old self took hold of the Nightsoul bucket, its eyes dull but perfectly capable of executing his daily sweeping and hauling routines without attracting a single glance. A massive, crushing force hooked into the back of Chen's soul. 5 years of mining, Chen thought, his mind racing as the world spun into darkness. Wait, I'm only 5 years old. Relocation complete. Welcome to Primal Realm 09. Start working, Supplier. Chapter 2, Primal Realm 09 and the Cold Iron Pick. The transition was not a gentle fade, but a violent drop. Chen fell face first onto a surface that felt harder than tempered steel. The impact should have shattered his 5-year-old collarbone, but the newly integrated myriad invention sovereign physique absorbed the kinetic energy, sending a dull, vibrating hum through his skeleton instead of the sickening crack of breaking bone. He rolled over, gasping, only to find there was no air to breathe. Panicking, his tiny lungs spasmed. His chest caved in as he tried to drag in oxygen, but the atmosphere of Primal Realm 09 was a vacuum, devoid of wind, warmth, or life. Just as blackness began to creep into the edges of his vision, a warm, rhythmic pulse erupted from his lower dantian. The heavenly primordial root activated automatically. It locked his lungs, sealing his internal breath, and began to filter the raw, volatile cosmic energy radiating from the starless void directly into his blood. I'm not suffocating, Chen realized, his heartbeat slowing. He didn't need to breathe. The system's upgrade was keeping his biological functions running on pure, unrefined cosmic fuel. He stood up, his small feet sinking slightly into a heavy, dark gray dust. The gravity here was monstrous. Every limb felt like it was encased in solid lead. Simply raising his arm felt like lifting a boulder. He looked up, and the sight nearly made him lose his footing. There was no sky. There was only a suffocating, infinite ink-black void, littered with massive, jagged planetary fragments that floated silently in the distance like frozen leviathans. He was standing on a colossal, dead asteroid core, a barren rock drifting through the graveyard of a shattered world. The ground beneath him was metallic, glittering with deep veins of raw, unpolished crystals that pulsed with a faint, hypnotic blue light. Ding! Welcome to Primal Realm 09. Gravity, 5.2x Earth standard. Atmosphere, vacuum. Threat level, low, no indigenous life forms present. The Genesis pickaxe has been automatically equipped to your soul. Please retrieve it from your personal storage to begin the extraction task. Chen closed his eyes and willed his consciousness into his spiritual space. Floating amidst the void of his mind were the items from his starter pack. With a thought, a small, dark pickaxe materialized in his hands. It was tiny, perfectly scaled for a 5-year-old, but it had an incredible, dense weight. The handle was carved from a pitch-black, petrified wood that clung to his palms as if it were a natural extension of his skin. The double-sided head was forged from a dull, star-speckled metal that seemed to swallow the light. Genesis Pickaxe, Tier 1 Growth Type. Effect, 100% Armor Mineral Penetration. Adapts to the user's physical strength. Consumes 0 energy when striking designated system nodes. 5 million lower-grade stones. Chen muttered, his voice trapped inside his own mind, unable to travel through the vacuum of space. If I don't start now, I'll be a skeleton before I finish. Guided by an instinct he didn't know he possessed, courtesy of the myriad invention's sovereign physique, Chen approached the nearest exposed vein. The blue crystals looked like jagged teeth rising from the dark, metallic bedrock. He lifted the Genesis pickaxe. The 5x gravity dragged his arms down, threatening to throw him off balance. But his sovereign physique adjusted instantly, shifting his weight to his heels, locking his core, and swinging the pickaxe in a perfect, geometrically flawless arc. Clang! The strike didn't sound through the air, but the vibration traveled straight up the wooden shaft, through his arms, and rattled his brain. A tiny chip of blue crystal, no larger than a pebble, flaked off. System notification, 1x raw lower-grade spirit stone harvested. Current progress, 1/5 million. Chen stared at the tiny pebble, then at the massive, sprawling mountain of bedrock before him. A bitter, ironic laugh bubbled up in his chest. Back on Earth, people complained about 9-to-5 office grinds. Here, his shift was 5 years long, and his supervisor was a cosmic machine. Fine, Chen thought, his eyes hardening as he adjusted his grip. Let's get to work. He lifted the pickaxe again. Chapter 3, The First 1,000 and the Flesh-Forging Feast. Day 1 became Day 10. Day 10 became Month 3. In the starless vacuum of Primal Realm 09, there was no sun to mark the passage of time, only the rhythmic, endless rotation of the distant, shattered asteroids. Chen's life contracted to a single, relentless loop. Swing, strike, collect, repeat. Clang, clang, clang. Initially, his 5-year-old muscles screamed in agony after just an hour of swinging. The heavy gravity pressed down on him like a physical weight, bruising his shoulders and making his lungs burn. But every time his body reached its absolute physical limit, he would sit cross-legged on the cold metallic ground and retrieve one of the flawless flesh-forging pills from his inventory. The pill was a perfect ruby-red sphere that dissolved into a sweet, warm liquid the moment he placed it on his tongue. The effect was instantaneous and violent. The pill's medicinal efficacy didn't waste a single drop on waste or impurities. It targeted his muscle fibers, tearing them down and rebuilding them with dense, metallic-like strength. His bones, soft and malleable due to his young age, were packed with mineral density, becoming harder than the ores he was mining. By the end of the 3rd month, Chen had consumed his 3rd flesh-forging pill. He stood up, shaking the thick gray asteroid dust from his shoulders. He looked down at his tiny arms. They were still thin, the limbs of a young child, but beneath the pale skin, the musculature was wound as tight as copper wire. He picked up the Genesis pickaxe. It no longer felt heavy. In fact, it felt as light as a feather. He walked up to a fresh vein of spirit stones. His movement was fluid, completely unhindered by the 5.2x gravity. He swung. Shug. The Genesis pickaxe didn't just chip the stone this time. It sank deep into the metallic rock, cleanly shearing off a chunk of blue crystal the size of a fist. System notification, 12x raw lower-grade spirit stones harvested. Current progress, 14,203/5 million. The efficiency is increasing, Chen thought, a small dirt-smudged smile appearing on his face. Thanks to the myriad invention's sovereign physique, his body was memorizing the exact structural flaws of the rock formations. He no longer needed to strike blindly. He could see the microscopic stress lines in the veins. With a single, precise strike, he could cause a whole shelf of ore to fracture and collapse. But he couldn't afford to slack. The numbers required by the prime source system were staggering. As he worked, he noticed that the pile of mined stones did not clutter the ground. The moment a stone was fully severed from the bedrock, A faint gray light from his wrist would sweep over it, vacuuming the resource directly into the system's temporary storage vault. Clang, clang. He was no longer just a boy. He was becoming a machine. A 5-year-old titan chipping away at the foundation of a dead world. Chapter 4. Striking middle grade ore and the first overtime hint. By the end of the first year, Chen had mined his first 1 million lower grade spirit stones. The repetitive motion had become as natural to him as breathing. He didn't even have to think about the swings anymore. His mind could wander, reflecting on his past life on Earth, while his physical body executed flawless high-speed strikes that would make veteran mortal blacksmiths weep with envy. One day, deep within a cavern he had hollowed out of the asteroid's core, his pickaxe struck something that felt remarkably different. The feedback wasn't the sharp, brittle ring of lower-grade ore. It was a deep, resonant thud, like striking a thick layer of dense rubber. Chen narrowed his eyes. He cleared the surrounding gray dust and found a cluster of crystals that did not pulse with the standard, pale blue light. These crystals were a deep, sapphire blue, so saturated they looked almost black. The spiritual energy radiating from them was so dense it formed a visible, shimmering mist in the vacuum. Ding! Discovered, middle-grade spirit stone vein raw. Warning, middle-grade ore requires a minimum physical strike force of 3,000 Jin to fracture without damaging the internal energy structure. Attempting to mine with insufficient strength will shatter the crystal into useless dust. 3,000 Jin of force, Chen mused. A normal adult cultivator at the body tempering layer 5 might possess 1,000 Jin of strength. Only those at the absolute peak, body tempering layer 9, could exert 3,000 Jin of explosive force. Chen looked at his small, 5-year-old hands. Thanks to the gravity, the continuous mining, and the integration of 5 flesh-forging pills over the past year, his physical body had already bypassed the limits of a normal child. He retreated a step, planting his feet firmly into the dusty ground. He drew back the Genesis pickaxe. The myriad invention sovereign physique activated. Every muscle fiber in his legs, hips, back, and shoulders aligned in a perfect kinetic chain. He unleashed the swing. Boom! A silent shockwave of kinetic energy blasted the dust away from his feet. The Genesis pickaxe struck the sapphire vein. The deep blue crystal cracked cleanly along its natural fault lines, splitting into 5 perfectly uniform, palm-sized blocks. System notification, 5x middle-grade spirit stones harvested. Current progress, 5/1 million. Sovereign physique bonus, flawless extraction achieved. No energy loss detected. Chen wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. It was harder, much harder than mining the lower-grade stones, but the sense of accomplishment was intoxicating. Suddenly, a new sub-menu flickered on the corner of his interface. It was a small, golden timer labeled, Estimated completion time, 3 years, 2 months. Below the timer, a line of text read, Overtime policy. If the host completes the required quotas ahead of the 5-year limit, the remaining time will be converted into absolute sovereignty hours. During this time, all resources extracted belong 100% to the host. The system will not take its 50% split. Chen's eyes lit up, burning with a sudden, fierce greed. So if I finish early, everything I mine after that is mine to keep. He looked at the sapphire vein. He looked at the vast, unexplored depths of the asteroid. If he could amass a private stash of high-grade and top-grade spirit stones before returning to the real world, his future cultivation resources would be set for life. The lazy, quiet modern man inside him was instantly replaced by a rabid, overtime-hungry corporate worker. System, Chen thought, a wild grin breaking across his face. Unleash the daily quota tracking. I'm going to speedrun this planet. Chapter 5. The Subterranean Vault and the Crimson High-Grade Vein. By year 3, Chen's cavern had become a subterranean empire. He had carved miles of tunnels into the heart of Primal Realm 09. He no longer looked like the frail, starving orphan who had been kicked into the snow. He was now 8 years old by his internal clock, though only a few weeks had passed in the outside world. His hair was tied back with a strip of hemp, and his eyes carried the deep, terrifying stillness of someone who had spent years in absolute silence. He was currently standing before a glowing, crimson fissure deep in the asteroid's mantle. This was the nesting ground of the high-grade spirit stones. Unlike the lower and middle grades, these crystals did not grow in neat veins. They formed inside pockets of pressurized, superheated liquid spiritual energy. The temperature inside this fissure was hot enough to melt normal iron, yet Chen stood there clad only in his ruined trousers, his bare chest glistening with light sweat. His skin had taken on a faint, pearlescent sheen, the result of consuming his 8th flesh-forging pill and absorbing the pure, dense spiritual energy of the asteroid for 3 straight years. Ding! High-grade spirit stone extraction initiated. Density requirement, 10,000 Jin of impact force. Warning, high-grade veins possess a localized spiritual repulsion field. Prepare for kinetic backlash. Come on then, Chen muttered, gripping the Genesis pickaxe. The tool had grown with him. The dark metal head was now longer, sharper, and pulsed with a faint, crimson runes that matched the veins he was mining. He leaped into the fissure, his body defying the heavy gravity. As he descended toward a massive, glowing red crystal cluster, a powerful, invisible wave of spiritual pressure slammed into him, trying to push him away. Break! Chen roared in his mind. He spun in midair, utilizing the momentum of his fall and the sheer weight of his sovereign physique. He swung the pickaxe down with a force that exceeded 12,000 Jin. Crack! The pickaxe shattered the repulsion field. The shockwave of the strike sent a visible ripple through the pool of liquid energy below. The red crystal cluster fractured, splitting into dozens of glowing, hot high-grade stones. System notification, 42x high-grade spirit stones harvested. Current progress, 88,402/100,000. Chen landed lightly on a narrow stone ledge, his knees absorbing the impact effortlessly. He didn't pause to celebrate. He instantly leaped to the next cluster. His efficiency had reached a level of terrifying perfection. He was a whirlwind of motion, a tiny god of mining, carving his way through the richest treasures of a dead world. Chapter 6, The Summit of Top Grade and the Final Countdown. Year 4, Month 11. Chen stood at the absolute lowest point of the asteroid's core, a place where the gravity was so intense it distorted the light around it, creating a shimmering, warped effect in the vacuum. Before him floated a single, massive crystal that was entirely transparent. It did not emit blue, sapphire, or crimson light. Instead, it slowly cycled through all the colors of the spectrum, drawing in the stray cosmic rays from the distant void and condensing them into liquid light that dripped from its base. This was the progenitor of the vein, the top-grade spirit stone. Only 1,000 were required for the system's quota, but each one was a masterpiece of nature. A single top-grade spirit stone contained enough pure, unpolluted spiritual energy to power a major sect's defensive array for a century. Ding! Target acquired, primordial top-grade spirit core. Strike requirement, flawless precision. Force must be applied directly to the crystal's atomic focal point. Backlash potential, lethal to cultivators below the Foundation establishment stage. Chen raised his hand, stopping the system's automated warning. I know, he thought. I've analyzed its structure for 3 days. His eyes, reflecting the prismatic light of the crystal, did not show a single trace of fear. Over the last 4 years and 11 months, he had transformed. He was no longer just strong. His myriad invention sovereign physique had granted him an almost supernatural understanding of material physics. He could feel the breath of the stone. He slowly raised the Genesis pickaxe. He didn't use a wild, explosive swing this time. Instead, he drew back the tool with an agonizingly slow, controlled movement. He channeled every ounce of his physical strength, now a staggering 30,000 Jin of pure, concentrated muscle power, into the very tip of the pickaxe. He stepped forward. The movement was silent. He tapped the crystal. Ping! A sound like a crystal bell, ringing in a quiet room, echoed directly in his soul. The massive, prismatic core did not shatter. Instead, a hairline fracture appeared at the exact point of contact. The fracture spread rapidly, tracing a beautiful geometric pattern across the entire structure before it cleanly divided into exactly 1,000 perfect, thumb-sized prismatic diamonds. System notification, 1,000x top-grade spirit stones harvested. Current progress, 1000/1000. All core quotas for Task 1 have been successfully met. Calculating time remaining. Remaining time, 29 days, 14 hours, 32 minutes. Status, overtime mode activated. All extractions for the next 29 days will bypass the 50-50 split. 100% of harvested resources will be deposited directly into the host's private inventory. Chen's eyes turned completely red. The exhausting labor of the last 5 years vanished from his mind, replaced by a surge of pure, unadulterated adrenaline. 29 days of free mining, he whispered, a mad, beautiful grin spreading across his face. System, show me the map. Where are the rest of the top-grade veins? Chapter 7. The Overtime Massacre of the Asteroid Core. For the next 29 days, Chen did not sleep. He did not rest. He did not eat. He became a natural disaster. Armed with his Tier 1 Genesis pickaxe, and powered by the absolute greed of a modern man who had finally been offered a tax-free overtime bonus, he tore through the remaining veins of Primal Realm 0-9 like a locust through a wheat field. He targeted only the highest value targets. He ignored the lower-grade veins entirely, focusing his monstrous strength solely on the middle, high, and top-grade deposits he had marked over the past 4 years. Boom, crack, clang. Caverns collapsed behind him as he systematically stripped them of their treasures. He mined with a speed that was 3 times faster than his average pace over the past 5 years. His sovereign physique was pushed to its absolute limit, his muscles steaming with vaporized spiritual energy as he forced his body to execute strike after strike. Private inventory update. Plus 140, 000 middle-grade spirit stones, host-owned. Plus 12, 000 high-grade spirit stones, host-owned. Plus 184 top-grade spirit stones, host-owned. When the final seconds of the countdown began to tick away, Chen was buried chest-deep in a collapsed vein of deep blue sapphire stones, his pickaxe still swinging with wild, manic energy. 000003, 000002, 000001. Ding! Overtime period has expired. Task 1 is officially closed. Initiating resource division and extraction to central warehouse. A massive, warm, golden light descended from the void, enveloping the temporary storage vault. Chen watched as exactly half of the 5 million lower-grade stones, half of the middle, high, and top-grade stones he had mined during the regular 5-year period, were swept away into a massive, swirling vortex of runic light. 50% split successfully delivered to the Multiverse central warehouse. Replication blueprints established for all subsidiary systems. Calculating host rewards. Chapter 8, The Return and the Hidden Cultivation. Task 1 Evaluation. SSS grade, perfect efficiency, 0 resource degradation, maximum overtime utilization. Generating rewards. Reward 1, direct injection of peak chi condensation cultivation, layer 13 flawless realm. Reward 2, Genesis pickaxe upgraded to Tier 2 unlocks mineral sense. Reward 3, 10,000 system contribution points. Here it comes, Chen thought, bracing himself. The golden vortex in the sky split, and a pillar of pure, liquid-like celestial energy crashed directly into his head. Unlike the painful physical restructuring of the flesh-forging pills, this energy was incredibly gentle, yet unimaginably vast. It poured into his newly mutated heavenly primordial root, which instantly began to spin like a cosmic whirlpool. His cultivation level, which had been at the absolute 0 of a mortal, began to explode. Chi condensation layer 1, layer 3, layer 7, layer 10. The barriers of the chi condensation realm, which normal outer disciples spent decades trying to break through, fell like wet paper before the deluge of primal energy. Within seconds, his dantian was filled with a vast, swirling sea of liquid spiritual chi, pulsing with a flawless, golden luster. He had reached peak chi condensation, layer 13, a hidden, legendary realm that most modern cultivators didn't even know existed, as most only knew of the 12-layer standard. Warning, host is about to be returned to Cultivation World 9042. Your current energy signature is highly volatile, and will trigger regional heavenly tribulation and attract the attention of high-level cultivators within a 10,000-mile radius. System, mask it, Chen commanded immediately, his panic cutting through the post-cultivation high. Mask my cultivation to Chi condensation layer 1, and mask my spiritual root back to the 5-element trash root. Command received, activating absolute concealment protocol. A gray, misty shroud of runic laws wrapped around his dantian and his spiritual root. The vast, golden sea of liquid chi was instantly suppressed, locked behind an unbreakable spiritual dam. To any outside observer, his body would appear to have only a thin, pathetic thread of disorganized chi, the classic sign of a mediocre, low-talent layer 1 cultivator. His heavenly root was camouflaged, showing 5 muddy, conflicting elemental colors. Concealment successful, initiating spatial return. The black void of Primal Realm 09 shattered like a glass mirror. Chen gasped, and suddenly the freezing, crisp air of the northern peaks rushed into his lungs. He was standing on the 695th step of the outer gate supply route. The wooden bucket of nightsoul was still in his hands. He looked down at his clothes. They were still dirty and wet with slush. He looked to his side. The translucent sliver consciousness projection dissolved, merging back into his mind, instantly transferring 18 days of memories. The projection had done a perfect job. It had carried the buckets, taken 3 more kicks from the older servant boys, and eaten 2 cold, moldy buns without causing a single drop of suspicion. Chen let out a slow, silent breath. To the world, he was still the pathetic 5-year-old garbage boy. But as he gripped the frozen rope handle of the bucket, his physical strength, now capable of shattering mountains, made the heavy wooden tub feel lighter than a feather. He took a step up the stairs. A small, hidden smile played on his lips. "The show begins," he whispered. Chapter 9, The Mediocre Servant. For the next 7 years, the Azure Mist sect remained completely unchanged, and so did Chen. Or at least that is what everyone believed. In the outer gate, thousands of servant disciples came and went. Some died of exhaustion, some were expelled, and a lucky few managed to break through to the Chi condensation layer 1 by age 12, earning the right to become official outer disciples. Chen was one of those lucky ones. At age 12, he stood in the grand plaza of the outer gate testing hall, dressed in a slightly clean, gray outer disciple robe. His face was average, his posture slightly slouched, and he stood in the very back of the crowd of 300 children, carefully avoiding the gaze of the testing elders. "Next," Chen, the hall deacon, called out, his voice laced with boredom. Chen stepped forward, his head bowed slightly. He placed his hand on the cold, black testing stone. The stone hummed softly, and then flickered with 5 weak, muddy colors: red, blue, green, yellow, and brown. A thin, pathetic line of white light rose barely 3 inches up the stone's base. Chen, 5-element trash root, cultivation, Chi condensation layer 1, the deacon announced, barely glancing at him before scribbling on a parchment. Barely passed, assign him to the low-grade tasks. Next. Chen bowed respectfully and stepped down, his face showing a perfect expression of disappointment mixed with relief. As he walked back into the crowd, he heard some of the other newly promoted disciples snickering. 5-element trash root. He probably used up all his family's luck just to hit layer 1 at age 12. A waste of resources. He'll never reach layer 3 in his life. Chen ignored them. In his mind, he was looking at his actual system status panel. Host Chen. True cultivation. Peak Chi condensation, layer 13 flawless. True spiritual root. Heavenly primordial root, concealed. Physique, myriad invention, sovereign physique, concealed. System points, 10,000. Private inventory, 140K middle grade, 12K high grade, 184 top grade spirit stones. He had spent the last 7 years participating in 3 more system mining tasks during his sleep hours, accumulating an even larger mountain of raw resources. He didn't need the sect's pathetic low-grade chi-gathering pills. He didn't need their approval. He just needed a quiet, stable place with a library where he could prepare for the next phase of his plan, acquiring the spiritual botany and agriculture inheritance. Chapter 10, The Pill Hall Gardener. Because of his abysmal talent and low cultivation, Chen was assigned to the most undesirable post in the inner gate, the Pill Hall's spiritual herb gardens. The gardens were located in a damp, foggy valley at the base of the Pill Hall's mountain. The work was tedious, physically exhausting, and offered almost no opportunity for advancement. Most disciples avoided it because the spirit plants released toxic, unrefined medicinal vapors that could damage weak meridians. But to Chen, it was paradise. "This is your plot, kid," a grumpy, middle-aged outer disciple named Uncle Liu said, pointing to a patch of muddy gray soil filled with dying, yellow-leaf, chi-gathering grass. "Keep them alive. If the survival rate drops below 80% this month, your spirit stone's allocation will be cut." "Yes, Uncle Liu, I will do my best," Chen said, bowing meekly. Uncle Liu grunted and walked away, muttering about trash talent being sent to do trash work. Once the elder was out of sight, Chen's slouched posture vanished. He walked to the center of the garden, his eyes scanning the dying plants. Thanks to his hidden myriad invention, Sovereign Physique, he could instantly see the problem. The soil was too acidic, and the spiritual water irrigation system was clogged with limestone. "Perfect," Chen whispered. He sat down on a wooden bench inside his small, isolated gardener's hut. He closed his eyes and summoned the system. Ding! Requirement for Task 2 met. Host has secured a position involving biological cultivation. Unlocking Inheritance 2, Spiritual Botany and Primal Agriculture. Initiating transfer to Primal Realm 14, the Toxic Verdant Wetland. Task 2 Objective. Cultivate and harvest 1 million units of 9-life resurrection grass and 500,000 units of primal Yinkor lotuses. Time allotted, 10 years subjective primal time. Real-world time dilation, 1:100 ratio, approximately 36 days will pass in the Azure Mist Sect. Deploying sliver consciousness projection to maintain gardener duties. Chen's mind detached from his physical body. The damp valley of the Pill Hall dissolved, and his consciousness plunged into a world of endless emerald green fog. Chapter 11, The Toxic Verdant Wetland. When Chen opened his eyes, he was standing on a floating root of a colossal, prehistoric mangrove tree. The air was thick, humid, and tinted a pale, sickly green. Below him, a vast, endless swamp stretched out to the horizon, covered in a dense layer of glowing, toxic moss. There was no sky here, only a dense, glowing canopy of bioluminescent vegetation that hung from the upper branches of the world trees. The gravity was normal, but the atmosphere was highly acidic. The moment he arrived, his clothes began to hiss, the fabric dissolving into rags. Ding! Primal Realm 14, the Toxic Verdant Wetland. Toxicity level, Grade 4, corrosive to mortal flesh. Host Sovereign Physique has automatically adapted, unlocking acid resistance. Chen looked down at his bare chest. A faint, emerald light played across his skin, neutralizing the corrosive mist as soon as it touched him. Floating in front of him were 2 small bags of seeds and a massive, leather-bound manual titled, The Genesis Encyclopedia of Botany. 10 years, Chen said, a spark of excitement in his eyes. He didn't mind the solitude. In fact, after 7 years of pretending to be a useless servant in the sect, the absolute silence of this dead world was a welcome relief. He opened the manual. The pages were blank, but as his fingers touched them, a flood of information poured directly into his brain, courtesy of the botany inheritance. He learned the exact soil composition required for the extinct 9-life resurrection grass. He learned how to harvest toxic swamp mud, refine it using his own spiritual chi, and turn it into the ultimate fertilizer. He learned how to read the pulse of a plant's roots. He looked at the dark, bubbling swamp water below. "Let's build a farm," he said. Chapter 12, The Master of the Swamp. Year 1, in the wetland, was spent entirely on land reclamation. Using his Tier 2 Genesis pickaxe, which could now transform into a spectral shovel, Chen cleared miles of toxic mangrove roots. He constructed raised, wooden planting beds using the acid-resistant timber of the world trees. He designed a complex, multi-tiered irrigation system that filtered the toxic swamp water through layers of charcoal, spiritor dust, and volcanic ash, turning it into a nutrient-rich spiritual liquid. He planted the first batch of 9-life resurrection grass. The grass was incredibly temperamental. If the soil temperature shifted by even a single degree, or if the acid content in the air rose slightly, the sprouts would instantly wither and turn to ash. But Chen was patient. He slept beside the planting beds, using his own body to block the cold drafts of toxic fog. He used his heavenly primordial root to gently radiate a soft, wood-attributed chi into the soil, keeping the seeds warm during the swamp's night cycles. By the end of the second year, his first field of resurrection grass was a sea of shimmering, silver-tipped leaves. System notification: first batch of 9 life resurrection grass harvested. Quantity 50,000 units. Quality flawless. Botany comprehension increased by 5%. As he worked, his understanding of the plants deepened to a terrifying degree. He didn't just grow them, he could feel their emotions. He knew when they were thirsty, when they were cold, and when they were ready to release their seeds. He also began to experiment. Using his free time, he planted some of the ordinary seeds he had smuggled from the Azure Mist sect's gardens in his private inventory. Under the dense, primal conditions of the wetland, these ordinary plants underwent bizarre, rapid mutations, turning into high-grade spiritual variations that did not exist in the modern world. This, Chen laughed, holding a giant, glowing red carrot that radiated dense fire attribute chi, is going to make some incredible wine later. Chapter 13. The Golden Lotus and the Secret of Fermentation. By year 6, Chen had completed the quota for the resurrection grass. His entire focus shifted to the primal Yinkor lotuses. These plants only grew in the deepest, most toxic abysses of the wetland, where the concentration of toxic energy was so high it liquefied into black, freezing mud. To cultivate them, Chen had to dive into the freezing, pitch-black swamps, diving hundreds of feet below the surface to plant the seeds directly into the mineral-rich geothermal vents. During these deep dives, his body underwent a secondary refinement. The freezing temperature and the immense water pressure compressed his liquid golden chi, making his foundation even more terrifyingly solid. It was during these lonely years that he unlocked the subcategory of the botany inheritance, the spirit wine brewing. If I ferment the juices of the Yinkor lotus with the mutated spiritual fruits I grew in the upper beds, Chen mused, sitting in his wooden cabin, watching a large, hollowed-out tree trunk bubble with a dark, fragrant purple liquid. He had designed a natural fermentation process using the unique yeasts of the primal wetland. The resulting brew was not ordinary alcohol. When he took his first sip, a wave of liquid fire rushed down his throat, followed by a freezing, minty blast that expanded his meridians by 10% in a single second. Ding! Host has successfully brewed a new variation of spirit wine, Primal Yin-Yang Meridian Cleansing Brew. Effect: permanently increases meridian width and elasticity, clears all internal pill toxins. This is amazing, Chen gasped, his eyes shining. If I sell this in the outside world, even Golden Core experts would fight to the death for a single jar. But he didn't plan on selling it yet. He bottled it all, storing it safely in his private inventory. It was his personal fuel, the secret weapon that would allow him to cultivate without ever experiencing bottlenecks. Chapter 14. Return of the Master Gardener. Year 10, Month 9. Chen stood amidst an endless, glowing emerald paradise. The toxic, swampy wetland had been entirely transformed into a highly organized, high-yield agricultural marvel. Millions of silver resurrection grass plants waved in the gentle breeze of his filtering fans, and the deep, black pools of the swamp were covered in a sea of glowing, golden Yinkor lotuses. Ding! All quotas for Task 2 have been successfully met. Calculating overtime. Remaining time, 3 months, 12 days. Overtime mode activated. All harvests during this period belong 100% to the host. Chen didn't waste a single second. For the next 3 months, he harvested like a madman, filling his private inventory with millions of rare, extinct herbs, mutated fruits, and hundreds of jars of his privately brewed meridian cleansing wine. When the countdown finally hit 0, he was sitting on a mountain of glowing golden lotuses, a half-empty jar of wine in his hand, laughing like a maniac in the silent, green fog. Initiating return to Cultivation World 9042. The emerald wetland shattered. Su Chen blinked. The damp, chilly fog of the Pill Hall Valley rushed back into his senses. He was sitting on the wooden bench inside his garden hut. He looked down at his hands. They were once again the dirt-smudged hands of a 12-year-old boy. Beside him, his sliver consciousness projection dissolved. Through its memories, Su Chen saw that 36 days had passed. The projection had kept the garden perfectly healthy, maintaining a strict 82% survival rate, just enough to avoid suspicion, but not enough to attract any praise. He smiled, feeling the massive, rumbling pool of golden chi in his dantian grow even denser. He was now ready for his next move. Chapter 15, The Unseen Shield. Over the next 4 years, Su Chen lived like a ghost in the Pill Hall Gardens. He was now 16. In a sect where 16-year-olds were supposed to be breaking through to the foundation establishment stage to become elite inner disciples, Su Chen remained firmly in the outer gate garbage category, his public cultivation level showing only a mediocre chi condensation layer 5. He had deliberately chosen this level. It was high enough to prevent him from being bullied by the youngest servants, but low enough that the true geniuses of the sect didn't even know he existed. Whenever trouble did find him, he handled it with terrifying, quiet efficiency. Once, a greedy inner disciple named Chen Feng tried to seize Su Chen's private garden plot to grow a rare fire attribute herb for his own advancement. Chen Feng had arrived with 3 thuggish followers, threatening to break Su Chen's legs if he didn't sign over the land. Su Chen didn't fight back. He didn't show his monstrous strength. Instead, using his sliver consciousness projection, he subtly tracked Chen Feng's movements. That night, he quietly sprinkled a pinch of primal shadowler powder, a substance he had formulated in the toxic wetlands, on Chen Feng's courtyard gates. Within an hour, 3 wild, high-level spiritual beasts from the nearby mountain range, attracted by the powder's scent, went completely feral and trampled Chen Feng's courtyard to pieces, sending the young master to the medical hall for 3 months. No one ever suspected the quiet, slouched garden boy who spent his days napping in the corner of the pill hall. To the world, Su Chen was just a background character, and that was exactly how he liked it. Chapter 16, The Third Inheritance, Volcano and Ford. At age 17, the Prime Source System issued its 3rd mandatory task. Ding! Requirement for Task 3 met. Host has maintained a stable, unnoticeable identity for 4 years. Unlocking Inheritances 3 and 4, Alchemy and Artifact Forging. Initiating transfer to Primal Realm 22, the Obsidian Forge World. Task 3 Objective. Refine 10 million units of perfect-grade chi-regulating pills and forge 10,000 master copy iron swords. Time allotted, 15 years subjective primal time. Real-world time dilation, 1:100 ratio, approximately 54 days will pass in the Azure Mist sect. Su Chen smiled, finally. The fire begins. His mind detached, and his consciousness descended into a world of molten red rivers, dark volcanic glass, and the endless metallic ring of a cosmic hammer. Chapter 17, The Obsidian Forge. Primal Realm 22 was a brutal, beautiful nightmare. The planet was a massive, active volcanic forge, covered in oceans of liquid basalt and black obsidian glass. The air was filled with the smell of sulfur and burning metal, and the sky was a constant, stormy gray, illuminated by the bright orange glow of the lava rivers. Ding! Primal Realm 22, the Obsidian Forge World, temperature 800 degrees C. Host's sovereign physique has adapted, unlocking true fire immunity. Su Chen stood on a platform of black volcanic glass, surrounded by a sea of liquid fire. He was 17 now by the outside world's clock, his body having matured into a lean, powerful frame. Floating in front of him was a massive black anvil made of starcore iron, and a huge, towering bronze cauldron that hummed with ancient runic power. "Let's start with the forging," Su Chen said, his eyes reflecting the molten glow of the lava. He retrieved the Genesis pickaxe, which instantly transformed into a massive, heavy blacksmith's hammer. For the next 5 years, Su Chen lived by the anvil. He mined the raw, star-iron ores from the volcanic vents, melted them down in the liquid basalt, and hammered them on the black anvil. Clang, clang, clang. His myriad inventions, sovereign physique, guided his movements. Every strike of his hammer was mathematically perfect, hitting the hot metal with the exact force required to drive out the impurities without damaging the crystal structure of the iron. He forged 10,000 basic iron swords. These were not ordinary weapons, because they were forged under the flawless primordial laws of the system. Each sword, though looking like a simple, unadorned iron blade, possessed a sharpness and durability that exceeded the high-grade spiritual swords of the Azure Mist sect's grand elders. These were the absolute archetypes, the templates that would be copied by millions of systems across the multiverse to be handed out to system heroes as their starter weapons. Chapter 18, The Perfect Pill. After completing the swords, Chen turned his attention to the bronze cauldron. The task was to refine 10 million chi-regulating pills. This was the most basic pill in the cultivation world, used by millions of low-level cultivators to stabilize their energy. But the system didn't want standard pills. It wanted perfect-grade pills, pills with 0% impurity. In the modern cultivation world, even the grandest alchemy masters could only refine pills with a 5 to 10% impurity rate. A pill with 0 impurities was considered a myth, a legend that belonged to the immortal realms. But Chen had the alchemy inheritance. He gathered the mutated herbs he had grown in the toxic wetlands and began to feed them into the bronze cauldron, using the natural volcanic heat of the planet to melt them down. His first 3,000 batches were complete failures. The volcanic heat was too wild, too unstable. But Chen didn't give up. He spent 3 years learning to read the pulse of the fire. He used his own golden, wood-attributed chi to wrap around each herb, protecting their delicate structures from the harsh flames until the exact moment of extraction. By year 9, his first perfect pill was born. It was a small, pearl-white sphere that did not emit a strong scent. Instead, it was completely odorless, its surface so smooth it looked like polished jade. When he held it, the spiritual energy inside did not leak out at all. It was completely sealed within the pearl-like shell. System notification, 1x perfect grade chi-regulating pill refined. Impurity rate 0%. Current progress 1/10 million. Beautiful, Chen whispered. He accelerated his production. He built 10, 20, 50 cauldrons, controlling them all simultaneously using his powerful, divided divine sense, a technique he had developed during his long years of solitary cultivation. He became a master of the furnace, his hands moving in a blur of runic gestures as millions of perfect pills poured from the bronze cauldrons into the system's storage. Chapter 19, The Art of Getting Expelled. When Chen returned to the Azure Mist sect at age 18, his plan to leave was fully formed. 54 days had passed in the outside world. He was still the quiet, talentless garden boy of the pill hall, but his true strength had reached a level that was completely unimaginable. He was a master blacksmith, a master alchemist, and his hidden cultivation was at the very peak of the chi condensation realm, ready to break through to foundation establishment at any moment. But he didn't want to break through in the sect. In the Azure Mist sect, breaking through to the foundation establishment stage meant you were automatically promoted to an inner disciple, which came with heavy responsibilities, mandatory missions, and constant supervision by the sect elders. He wanted his freedom. He wanted a quiet shop in the mortal world where he could focus on his system tasks without being watched. So he decided to get himself fired. During the Pill Hall's annual alchemy evaluation, Chen was assigned to refine a basic chi-gathering pill in front of 3 high-ranking inner sect elders. This was his stage. "Begin," the lead elder announced. Chen stepped up to his cauldron, his face showing a perfect expression of nervous panic. He threw the herbs into the furnace, but instead of controlling the flames gently, he deliberately channeled a disorganized, chaotic burst of fire attribute chi into the bottom of the cauldron. Boom! The cauldron exploded in a cloud of thick, black, sulfurous smoke. The blast was harmless, but it covered the testing elders in soot, making them cough violently. You useless waste," the lead elder roared, wiping the black dust from his face. "This is the 3rd cauldron you have exploded this week." "Elders, forgive me," Chen cried, bowing frantically, his face covered in fake soot. My five-element trash root makes it impossible for me to balance the spiritual flames. I have no talent." The elders stared at him with absolute disgust. 17 years old and still at chi condensation layer 5. No control, no talent, and a constant waste of sect resources, the elder said, his voice cold and flat. "Chen, by the rules of the Azure Mist sect, you are hereby stripped of your outer disciple status and expelled from the mountain." Chen bowed deeply, keeping his head low so the elders couldn't see the massive, ecstatic grin that was currently tearing across his face. "Thank you for your mercy, elders," he said, his voice trembling with grief. 10 minutes later, Chen had packed his small wooden chest, walked past the grand gates of the Azure Mist sect, and stepped onto the mountain road leading down to the mortal world. He was finally free. Chapter 20, Clear Stream City and the Quiet Apothecary. 30 miles from the Azure Mist sect lay Clear Stream City, a bustling, noisy mortal city filled with merchants, mercenaries, and low-level cultivators who had failed to enter the major sects. In a quiet, dusty alleyway near the city's eastern market, a small, 2-story wooden shop opened its doors. Above the entrance hung a simple, hand-painted wooden sign, "The Quiet Cloud Apothecary." The shopkeeper was a handsome, quiet young man of 18 named Chen. He wore a simple, clean blue scholar's robe and spent most of his days sitting on a wooden rocking chair behind the counter, reading old books and sipping a pale, fragrant tea. To his neighbors, Chen was a nice, somewhat lazy young fellow who had failed out of the sect and opened a failing shop to make a meager living. He sold basic, slightly flawed herbs and low-grade healing salves to local mercenaries, barely making enough to pay his rent. But behind the locked doors of the shop's small back room lay a spatial array that connected directly to a hidden vault. Inside that vault sat millions of perfect-grade pills, thousands of masterclass iron swords, and jars of celestial, meridian-cleansing wine, a treasure hoard that could easily buy the entire Azure Mist sect 10 times over. "This," Chen said, leaning back in his rocking chair as the warm afternoon sun spilled through the window of his shop, "is the life." He closed his eyes, a gentle smile on his lips, as the familiar grand chime of the Prime Source System resonated in his soul, preparing him for the next, even greater task. Chapter 21, The Little Beggar of the East Market. Winter in Clear Stream City lacked the grand, majestic snowfalls of the Azure Mist sect's peaks, but it made up for it with a miserable, bone-chilling sleet. The muddy streets of the Eastern Market turned into a treacherous slush of animal waste, rotten cabbage leaves, and frozen clay. Chen sat behind the counter of the Quiet Cloud Apothecary, his hand cupped around a hot ceramic mug of tea. The small charcoal brazier at his feet crackled softly, radiating a comforting warmth that kept the damp chill of the door frame at bay. To the passing merchants, he was just a failed sect disciple trying to survive the winter. But beneath his simple scholar's robes, Chen's divine sense, now incredibly sharp after decades of subjective training in the primal worlds, was gently unfurled like a spider's web across the immediate alleyways. A sudden, sharp commotion in the street broke his quiet contemplation. "Get out of here, you filthy little thief. If you touch those steamed buns again, I'll break your arms." A heavy, grease-splattered man in a stained apron stood outside a nearby noodle stall, waving a steaming bamboo ladle. In front of him, huddled in the slush, was a tiny figure. It was a girl, looking no older than 5. Her skin was a sickly gray-blue from the cold, her feet completely bare and encrusted with frozen mud. Her clothes were nothing but a collection of filthy, threadbare potato sacks tied together with a frayed piece of hemp rope. In her trembling, frost-bitten fingers, she clutched a single, dropped scrap of boiled turnip skin. She didn't cry, she didn't beg. She only stared at the noodle seller with large, hollow, completely lifeless black eyes, the eyes of someone who had already accepted that she was a carcass waiting to be buried by the snow. The noodle seller lifted his ladle, ready to strike her frozen hand. Chen set his tea mug down. The wood of his rocking chair creaked slightly. He didn't use a flashy movement technique. He simply stepped out of the shop, his boots crunching softly on the frozen slush. In the eyes of the mortals, he was just a regular, slow-moving young man. But by the time the noodle seller's ladle began its downward arc, Chen was already standing between them. His hand reached out, casually catching the wooden handle of the ladle. The noodle seller gasped, trying to pull it back, but it felt as though the ladle had been cast into solid granite. "Brother, she's just a child," Chen said, his voice quiet, carrying the easygoing tone of a local merchant. He reached into his sleeve, pulling out 3 copper coins and dropping them into the man's greasy hand. "Let it go. I'll pay for whatever she took." The noodle seller looked at the copper coins, more than enough to buy 5 whole buns, and his angry expression vanished. "Ah, shopkeeper Sue, you're too kind. This little mute has been hanging around the alleyways for weeks. She's going to die before the spring anyway. Don't waste your money." Chen didn't answer. He let go of the ladle and slowly knelt down in the cold mud, bringing himself to eye level with the silent little girl. The cold radiating from her body was terrifying. She was shivering so violently that her teeth clicked together like small pebbles. Yet, as she looked at him, her grip on the turnip skin didn't loosen. "Are you hungry?" Chen asked gently. The girl didn't nod. She only stared, her black eyes filled with a deep, instinctive wariness. Chen smiled. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, dried sweet potato, a normal, non-spiritual snack he kept for himself. He held it out. The girl's eyes flickered. She snatched the potato with a speed that would have surprised a chi condensation cultivator, instantly shoving it into her mouth, swallowing it almost without chewing. "Come inside," Chen said, standing up and holding out his hand. "It's warm." The girl looked at his clean, pale hand, then at her own filth-stained fingers. For the first time, a trace of hesitation appeared in her empty eyes. But the freezing wind blew a fresh gust of icy sleet down the street, and the warmth radiating from the open door of the quiet cloud apothecary was too much to resist. She placed her tiny, freezing hand in his. "Ding. System detection. Host has initiated contact with an eligible karmic companion. Target name unnamed beggar. Age 5 years old. Physical state extreme malnutrition, necrotic frostbite, damaged meridians. Current loyalty trust metric to host 15%, slightly curious / highly wary." Chen kept his face expressionless as the system prompt flickered across his vision. He led her into the shop, quietly closing the wooden door against the cold winter air. Chapter 22, Nursing the Little Shadow. The back room of the quiet cloud apothecary was cozy, heated by a small, clean-burning coal stove. Chen sat the small girl on a low wooden stool. He fetched a basin of warm water and a clean, soft cotton cloth. He didn't speak, knowing that words often frightened creatures that had only known violence. He simply began to gently wash the frozen mud from her feet. The warm water turned black instantly. As the dirt cleared, Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. Her feet were covered in nasty, purple frostbite sores, and some of the skin was already beginning to rot. If left untreated, she would lose her toes within a week. "This will sting a little, but it will save your feet," Chen whispered. He didn't use the cheap, diluted salves he sold to the mercenaries. He reached into his sleeve, covertly accessing his private system inventory, and pulled out a tiny jade jar. Inside was a soft, pale green ointment refined from the 9-life resurrection grass he had grown in the primal wetlands. The moment he unscrewed the lid, a faint, clean scent of fresh pine and spring rain filled the small room. He gently smeared a small dab of the ointment onto her rotting frostbite sores. The girl's body stiffened. Her small hands clutched the edge of the wooden stool so hard her knuckles turned white. A tiny, muffled whimper escaped her lips, but she didn't scream. She stared at her feet, her eyes widening as she watched the black, necrotic skin on her toes dissolve, replaced by a rapid, itching growth of fresh, healthy pink flesh. Within 3 breaths, her feet were completely healed, looking as smooth and clean as if she had never walked a day in the mud. "Ding. Loyalty / trust metric. 15%, 35%, deeply shocked / profound relief." "You need to eat something warm," Chen said, setting the jade jar aside. He went to the stove and retrieved a small earthen pot of rice porridge he had been simmering. He didn't just use ordinary rice. He had added a single, crushed seed of the Yinkor lotus and a tiny drop of his primal yin-yang meridian cleansing wine. To a mortal, the pure energy of these items would have blown their body apart. But Chen had diluted the ingredients to a microscopic degree, turning the porridge into a gentle, highly restorative medicinal broth that would slowly repair her damaged, frozen meridians from the inside out. He placed the bowl in front of her. The girl looked at the steaming, fragrant white porridge. She didn't use the wooden spoon. She picked up the hot bowl with both hands and began to gulp it down, her throat moving rapidly as she emptied the bowl in seconds. A sudden, deep flush of healthy pink color rushed to her pale cheeks. A gentle, warm sweat broke out on her forehead as the diluted medicinal energy began to flow through her limbs, dissolving the cold chi that had settled deep in her bones. She set the bowl down, wiping her mouth with her sleeve. For the first time, she looked up at Chen not with fear, but with a strange, intense focus. "Do you have a name?" Chen asked. The girl shook her head. "Do you know how to speak?" She opened her mouth, trying to form a sound, but only a dry, raspy wheeze came out. Her vocal cords had been scarred by severe throat chill during her years on the streets. "It's fine," Chen said, reaching out to gently pat her head. Her hair was messy and matted, but under his warm palm, she didn't flinch away. "I'll call you Ewer. From today on, you live here. You don't have to sweep the snow, and you don't have to steal buns." The little girl Ewer stared at him. A single, large tear finally broke through her blank expression, tracing a clean path through the soot on her cheek. Ding. Loyalty/trust metric. 35%, 55%, unshakable gratitude/emerging devotion. Chapter 23, The Apothecary's Assistant. 3 years passed in Clear Stream City like water flowing down a mountain stream. To the outside world, the quiet cloud apothecary had simply gained a quiet, extremely hardworking little helper. Ewer, now 8 years old, had grown into a neat, clean girl with a serious face and bright, intelligent eyes. She wore a simple green servant's tunic, her hair tied into 2 neat buns with red ribbons. Though she was still mute, she had learned to read and write under Chen's patient tutelage. She was incredibly efficient. She could identify over 500 common herbs by sight and smell, and she kept the shop's wooden counters so clean they practically reflected the clouds outside. "Shopkeeper Sue, your little helper is a treasure," a burly, scar-faced mercenary named Captain Iron said, tossing a handful of copper coins onto the counter. He had come to buy his regular supply of low-grade blood-stopping powder. "She doesn't speak, but she knows exactly which herb I need before I even open my mouth." Chen, sitting in his rocking chair, smiled lazily. "She's indeed very smart. She does all the work while I just drink tea." Ewer, who was currently wrapping a bundle of dried dandelions behind the counter, gave Captain Iron a polite, shallow bow, her serious face not showing a single emotion. But the moment the mercenary walked out of the shop, she turned her head and gave Chen a quiet, questioning look. "Should I stock the middle-grade chi-gathering pills tonight?" She wrote on a small wooden slate, holding it up for him to see. "No need," Chen replied, taking a sip of his tea. "The local sects have been active lately. If we show too many mid-grade goods, it will attract their attention. Just keep the shelves stocked with the low-grade herbal salves." Ewer nodded obediently, immediately wiping the slate clean and going back to her work. In her heart, Ewer knew that her quiet, lazy savior was anything but ordinary. Over the last 3 years, she had noticed many strange things. Sometimes, when she woke up in the middle of the night, she would see Chen sitting cross-legged on his bed, his body completely still, his breath so faint it seemed non-existent. At those times, the air in his room would feel heavy, smelling faintly of sulfur, volcanic fire, or ancient, wet soil that did not exist anywhere in Clear Stream City. Moreover, she had once seen him casually catch a falling knife that had slipped from her hand. His movement had been so fast her eyes hadn't even registered it, yet he had acted as if nothing had happened, continuing to drink his tea. But she never asked, she never pried. To her, Chen was her entire world. It didn't matter if he was a hidden immortal, a demon in disguise, or a simple mortal shopkeeper. As long as he wanted her to be a quiet shop assistant, she would be the best shop assistant in the world. Ding. Loyalty/trust metric. 55%, 85%, absolute loyalty/lifelong guardian instinct. Chapter 24, the 4th task, Talismans and the Storm Planet. One night after the shop doors had been securely bolted against the autumn wind, Chen sat in his room. The system interface opened before him, glowing with a deep, electric blue light that filled the dark room. Ding. Requirement for Task 4 met. Host has maintained a stable, secure operational base for 3 years. Unlocking Inheritance 5, Talisman Crafting. Initiating transfer to Primal Realm 33, the Lightning Rift Core. Task 4 objective. Craft 1 million units of Sovereign-grade Lightning Ward talismans. Time allotted, 8 years subjective primal time. Real-world time dilation. 1:100 ratio, approximately 29 days will pass in the Azure Mist Sect. Deploying Sliver Consciousness Projection. Chen looked toward the adjacent room where Yuer was currently sleeping. For the first time, he hesitated. His Sliver Consciousness Projection was a perfect tool for blending in, but it lacked his true warmth. Over the last 3 years, Yuer had become highly intuitive. She could tell the difference between his genuine, relaxed self and the quiet, empty projection he left behind during his shorter system trips. System, Chen thought. Can I take her with me? System notification. Companion transfer is currently locked. To unlock co-op primal travel, the companion's loyalty trust metric must reach 100% absolute resonance/shared soul bond. 85%, Chen murmured, looking at her profile panel. Not quite there yet, soon. He steeled his mind. Proceed with the transfer. His soul detached, and he plunged into a world of violent blue light, deafening thunder, and the scent of ozone. Chapter 25, The Lightning Rift Core. Primal Realm 33 was a chaotic, violent skyworld. There was no solid ground here, only a massive, swirling ocean of dark, metallic clouds that floated around a colossal, glowing core of liquid lightning. The gravity was low, but the atmospheric pressure was immense, filled with constant, violent electrical storms that could vaporize a standard chi condensation cultivator in an instant. Ding! Primal Realm 33, the Lightning Rift Core. Threat level high. Host's sovereign physique has adapted, unlocking true lightning immunity. Chen materialized on a floating platform made of magnetic iron ore. The moment he arrived, 3 massive blue lightning bolts slammed into his back, sending a shower of sparks flying into the dark air. He didn't even twitch. The lightning was absorbed directly into his myriad invention sovereign physique, refining his muscles and adding a faint, silver-blue spark to his liquid golden chi. Floating in front of him was a massive stack of primordial beast-skin parchments and a brush made of ancient lightning oak wood. Sovereign-grade lightning ward talismans, Chen said, his voice drowned out by a deafening clap of thunder. He picked up the brush. Talisman crafting was different from mining or forging. It didn't require raw physical strength. It required absolute microscopic control over his spiritual energy. He had to use his own chi as ink, carving intricate, complex runic channels onto the beast-skin parchment without making a single mistake. If his hand shook by even a hair's breadth, or if his chi flow fluctuated slightly, the runic lines would cross, causing the talisman to violently explode. For the first 2 years, the floating platform was a constant zone of explosions. Boom, boom. Chen's face was constantly covered in black soot, his hair standing on end from the static charge of the failed talismans. But his myriad invention sovereign physique was already memorizing the exact fluid mechanics of the runic ink. He learned to paint in sync with the rhythm of the lightning storms. When the thunder roared, his brush would accelerate. When the wind died down, his strokes would become slow and heavy, matching the natural frequency of the planet's magnetic field. By year 4, his first perfect sovereign-grade talisman was completed. It was a beautiful dark blue scroll covered in glowing, silver runes that seemed to squirm like tiny snakes. The moment it was finished, all the stray lightning bolts within 100 feet of the platform were drawn toward the talisman, safely absorbed into its surface without causing any damage. System notification, 1x sovereign-grade lightning ward talisman completed. Quality, flawless. Current progress, 1/1 million. Chen wiped a bead of sweat from his nose, a wild, sharp glint in his eyes. Let's paint, he whispered. Chapter 26, The Master of the Brush. By year 8, Chen had become a legend of the Skyworld. He no longer needed to look at the parchment when he painted. He could hold 10 brushes between his fingers, his arms moving in a blur of geometric motions, carving perfect, flawless runes on 10 scrolls simultaneously. The violent lightning storms of Primal Realm 33 no longer felt like a threat. They felt like his orchestra. With a wave of his hand, he could draw the raw lightning from the sky, using it directly as ink to paint his talismans, saving his own spiritual chi for the overtime period. System notification. All quotas for Task 4 have been met. Remaining time, 5 months, 18 days. Overtime mode activated. During his overtime, Chen didn't just paint more lightning wards. He began to experiment with advanced talisman designs from his system database. He crafted 9 Sky Thunderstrike talismans for offense, sovereign cloaking talismans for hiding, and even a unique space-folding talisman that could transport the user 5 miles away instantly. He stored them all in his private inventory, creating a massive, lethal deck of magical cards that could allow him to fight above his realm if he were ever forced to. When the final second ticked away, he was standing on his floating platform, surrounded by a swirling shield of 10,000 silver talismans, looking like a god of storms. Initiating return to Cultivation World 9042. The sky world shattered. Chen opened his eyes. The quiet, warm back room of his apothecary shop returned. He was sitting on his bed. He looked toward the door, expecting to see his projection's memories, but before he could, the wooden door was gently pushed open. Ewer stood there, holding a tray with a fresh pot of hot tea and a plate of steamed buns. She stopped in her tracks, her dark eyes locking onto his face. She stared at him for a long, silent moment, her nostrils flaring slightly as she caught the faint, fresh smell of ozone and electric static that lingered around his clothes. She set the tray down on the table, walked up to his bed, and picked up her wooden slate. "You're back," she wrote. Chen smiled, his heart warming. "Yes, Ewer, I'm back." Ewer didn't write anything else. She simply walked up to him, knelt by his bedside, and leaned her forehead gently against his knee, letting out a long, silent sigh of relief. Ding. Loyalty/trust metric. 85%, 95%, profound understanding/near-perfect resonance. Chapter 27, The Cloud Gathering Threat. While Chen was busy mining, growing, and crafting in the primal worlds, the balance of power in the region surrounding Clear Stream City was beginning to shift. A powerful rogue cultivation sect known as the Iron Blood Sect had recently moved into the nearby mountain range, aggressively seizing local mineral mines and demanding heavy tributes from the surrounding mortal cities. "They've already taken 3 silver mines from the lesser clans," Captain Iron muttered, sitting in the quiet cloud apothecary, his face looking unusually pale. He was bandaging a deep, nasty sword wound on his forearm. "They're ruthless. Anyone who refuses to pay their 50% tax is slaughtered. Clear Stream City is next." Chen, who was currently organizing some low-grade licorice roots behind the counter, raised an eyebrow. "Is the Azure Mist Sect not going to intervene? This city is technically under their protection." Captain Iron spat on the floor. "The Azure Mist Sect is too busy fighting a border war with the Southern Demon Sect. They don't have the spare experts to send here. We're on our own." Ewer, who was sweeping the floor nearby, paused. She looked at Chen, her eyes carrying a trace of worry. "It's fine," Chen said gently, his voice carrying an easy, reassuring warmth. "We're just a small apothecary. We don't have any money or treasures. The Iron Blood Sect won't care about a tiny shop like ours." But in his heart, Chen's eyes were cold. He had no desire to fight a war, but if this Iron Blood Sect dared to disrupt his peaceful shop, or if they dared to lay a single finger on Ewer, he would show them why the Prime Source was not to be angered. Chapter 28, The Overtime Upgrade. That night after Ewer had gone to sleep, Chen sat in the back room. He summoned his system panel to check his private stash. Thanks to his overtime harvests from his first 4 tasks, his private inventory was now a literal treasury of a supreme deity. Host's private stash, partial list. Spirit stones, 140,000 middle grade, 12,000 high grade, 184 top grade. Herbs, 50,000 units of 9-life resurrection grass, 20,000 yin-core lotuses. Weapons, 1,200 master copy iron swords, 400 star iron daggers. Talismans, 5,000 sovereign lightning wards, 1,200 night sky thunder strikes. Wine, 120 jars of primal yin-yang meridian cleansing brew. It's time to prepare, Chen thought. He retrieved a single, deep blue jar of his meridian cleansing brew. He broke the clay seal, and the rich, intoxicating scent of fermented lotuses filled the room. He took a deep drink. The liquid fire rushed down his throat, instantly triggering his hidden heavenly primordial root. His true cultivation, which had been suppressed at the absolute peak of the chi condensation realm for years, could no longer be contained. The spiritual dam in his dantian shattered. Boom! A silent, invisible wave of energy erupted from his body, shaking the dust from the wooden rafters of his room. The swirling sea of golden liquid chi in his dantian began to compress, spinning faster and faster until it condensed into a single, pristine, solid golden platform at the very center of his soul. The foundation establishment realm. His body underwent a secondary, profound purification. The impurities in his bones were flushed away by the pure, wood-attributed energy of the wine, his senses expanding until he could hear the rustle of a mouse's fur in the alleyway 3 blocks away. He quickly commanded the system, "Mask it, keep my public cultivation at chi condensation layer 5. Concealment successful, aura locked." Chen let out a long, clean breath of white mist. He felt incredibly powerful, his physical strength now easily exceeding 100,000 jin of force. He looked toward the dark window, his eyes shining with a sharp, silver-blue spark. "Come, Iron Blood Sect, let's see what you've got." Chapter 29, The Shadow over Clear Stream City. The crisis arrived 3 days later. A group of 7 Iron Blood Sect disciples, dressed in aggressive, blood-red robes and carrying heavy, iron-ringed broadswords, rode into Clear Stream City on heavy, scale-covered spiritual beasts. They rode directly to the Eastern Market, kicking over vegetable stalls and knocking down pedestrians without a single care. "Listen up, mortal dogs," the leader of the group, a scarred man at the chi condensation layer 9, roared, his voice carrying a trace of spiritual chi that rattled the windows of the nearby shops. "From today on, the Iron Blood Sect owns this city. Every shop must deliver 30% of their monthly profits to our temporary headquarters in the city hall. Anyone who fails to pay by tomorrow noon will have their shop burned and their heads hung from the city gates." The merchants cowered in fear, none of them daring to speak. Chen stood at the door of his shop, his hands tucked into his sleeves, watching the scene with a bored expression. Beside him, Ewer stood silently, her small hands clutched tightly around her wooden broom. She looked at the blood-red disciples, then at Chen, her eyes carrying a quiet, intense question. "Go inside, Ewer," Chen whispered. "It's getting cold." Ewer nodded and stepped back into the shop. But as the Iron Blood Sect leader rode past the quiet cloud apothecary, his eyes suddenly caught sight of the simple wooden sign and the clean, handsome face of Chen. He pulled the reins of his beast, stopping directly in front of the shop. "Hey, kid," the scarred leader sneered, pointing his broadsword at Chen's nose. "You're the shopkeeper of this place. Why aren't you bowing like the rest of the garbage?" Chen blinked, his expression completely innocent. "Ah, Cultivator Master, forgive me. My legs are weak from a winter illness. I cannot bow properly." The leader narrowed his eyes, his spiritual sense sweeping over Chen, catching only the thin, pathetic thread of a chi condensation layer 5 cultivator. "A waste of a cultivator," the leader spat, his face showing absolute disdain. "Make sure you have your tribute ready by tomorrow noon, garbage. If you're 1 copper coin short, I'll use your skull as a cup." With a loud laugh, the leader whipped his beast and rode away, his followers snickering as they followed him down the street. Chen watched them go, his smile still gentle, but in his mind, he was already opening his system's map, marking the coordinates of the Iron Blood Sect's temporary headquarters in the city hall. 10 hours until noon tomorrow, Chen thought, his eyes cold. Plenty of time to do some night shift work. Chapter 30, The Silent Night of the Iron Blood. Midnight in Clear Stream City was exceptionally dark. The sleet had stopped, but a thick, freezing fog had rolled in from the river, reducing visibility to less than 5 feet. The grand courtyard of the city hall, now the temporary headquarters of the Iron Blood Sect, was quiet. 2 guards at the chi condensation layer 6 stood by the heavy iron gates, their broadswords resting against their shoulders, yawning as they tried to stay warm. Suddenly, a faint, rhythmic sound of footsteps echoed in the fog. "Who's there?" one of the guards called out, gripping his sword. No one answered. Only a small, pale blue paper slip floated out of the thick fog, landing gently on the cold stone ground between the guard's feet. The guard frowned, leaning down to pick it up. "What is this?" "A talisman." The moment his fingers touched the paper, the silver-blue runes on the scroll suddenly flared with a blinding, white-hot light. Sovereign-grade lightning ward talisman, detonation mode. There was no loud explosion. Chen had designed the talisman to collapse its energy inward, creating a silent, localized vacuum of high-density electricity. Zap! A sudden, blinding arc of silver lightning jumped from the paper, instantly vaporizing the two guards into a pair of gray ash piles before they could even let out a single gasp. The thick fog parted, and a figure dressed in a simple, dark blue robe stepped into the courtyard. It was Chen. His face was covered by a simple wooden mask he had forged during his volcanic task, his eyes carrying a calm, terrifying stillness. "First two," he whispered. He stepped over the ash piles, walking toward the grand hall where the rest of the sect disciples were currently sleeping. Chapter 31, The Eradication. Inside the grand hall, the scarred leader of the Iron Blood sect was suddenly woken by a strange, freezing draft that swept through the closed wooden windows. "Who's there?" He sat up, his hand instantly reaching for his broadsword. In the center of the dark hall, a single figure stood silently in the shadows, his face obscured by a wooden mask. "You," the scarred leader gasped, his spiritual sense sweeping over the intruder but finding absolutely nothing, as if the person before him was nothing but a ghost. "Who are you? How did you get past the guards?" Chen didn't answer. He slowly raised his hand, holding a small, dark blue paper scroll between his fingers. "A talisman master," the leader sneered, his fear instantly replaced by arrogance as he leaped from his bed, his chi condensation layer 9 cultivation exploding as he swung his broadsword towards Chen's neck. "Die, rat!" Chen didn't move. He casually tossed the talisman. Sovereign grade 9 sky thunderstrike talisman. The scroll dissolved into a roaring, dragon-shaped bolt of blue lightning that filled the entire hall, the immense pressure instantly shattering all the stone pillars and wooden beams. "What?" the scarred leader cried, his broadsword shattering into iron dust the moment it touched the lightning dragon. The blue bolt slammed into his chest, vaporizing his blood-red robes, his meridians, and his flesh in less than a millisecond, leaving only a perfect, blackened scorch mark on the stone wall behind him. The remaining 6 disciples, who had just woken up from the commotion, stared at the scene in absolute, paralyzing horror. Their leader, a Layer 9 expert, had been vaporized in a single breath by a throwaway paper slip. "Demon, he's a demon!" one of the disciples screamed, trying to scramble out of the window. Chen didn't chase them. He casually reached into his sleeve, pulling out 6 small iron daggers he had forged in the molten world. With a gentle flick of his wrist, the daggers flew, cutting through the thick fog with a soft, metallic hum. Shug, shug, shug. The daggers, guided by his flawless physical precision, pierced the throats of the 6 fleeing disciples simultaneously, the immense kinetic force pinning their bodies to the wooden window frames. Within 3 minutes, the entire Iron Blood sect detachment in Clear Stream City had been completely wiped out. Chen walked through the ruined hall, his hands still clean, his breath undisturbed. He didn't leave any traces. He retrieved his daggers, swept the ash piles into a small storage bag to throw into the river later, and quietly stepped back into the freezing fog. By the time the city watch arrived the next morning, they found only an empty, ruined city hall, with no sign of the red-robed occupiers. The Iron Blood sect's invasion of Clear Stream City had ended before it even began. Chapter 32, The 5-Year-Old's Pledge. The morning sun broke through the remaining clouds, melting the sleet on the streets of the Eastern Market. Chen sat in his rocking chair behind the counter of the quiet Cloud Apothecary, calmly sipping his hot tea, looking exactly like the lazy, failed disciple he had always been. Yua was sweeping the floor, her movements quiet and rhythmic. Suddenly, she stopped in front of his counter. She set her broom aside, picked up her wooden slate, and wrote a single line, holding it up for him to see. The red-robed bad men are gone, forever. Su Chen raised his eyes from his tea mug, a gentle, small smile on his lips. Is that so? That's great news. Clear Stream City is once again peaceful. Ewer didn't wipe the slate. She wrote another line below it. I know it was you. You saved the city. You saved me. Su Chen's hand paused, his tea mug hovering an inch from his lips. He looked at her serious, intelligent, dark eyes, finding no fear or doubt in them, only an infinite, unbreakable devotion. The silence in the small shop stretched, warm and quiet. With a soft sigh, Su Chen set his mug down. He reached out, gently rubbing her small head. You are in this world, those who show their true power are often forced to fight endless, bloody battles, Su Chen said, his voice quiet, but carrying a deep, ancient weight. I just want to drink tea, brew some wine, and live a quiet life. Do you understand? Ewer stared at him, her eyes shining with a sudden, fierce light. She wiped the slate clean with her sleeve and wrote a final, large message in neat, bold strokes. I will be your shadow. If you want to hide, I will stand in front of you. If you want to sleep, I will watch the door. I will never tell anyone. Absolute trust. Ding. Loyalty/trust metric. 95%, 100%, absolute resonance/shared soul bond unlocked. Co-op primal travel feature has been successfully unlocked. Host can now bring companion Ewer into the primal worlds for joint extraction tasks. Su Chen stared at the green system prompt, then at the proud, small face of the girl before him. A soft, genuine laugh bubbled up in his chest. Well, Su Chen said, standing up and stretching his limbs, since you've made such a grand pledge, how would you like to see a world where the trees are 10,000 feet tall and the stars are blue? Ewer's eyes widened, her jaw dropping slightly in her first true expression of childish shock. Su Chen smiled, his hand gently grasping her small shoulder. Ding! Initiating dual companion transfer to Primal Realm 15, the Primordial Canopy. Task 5 objective. Harvest 10 million units of celestial star oak sap and forge 1,000 divine-grade runic bows. Time allotted, 20 years subjective primal time. Real-world time dilation. 1:100 ratio, approximately 72 days will pass in Clear Stream City. Deploying shared sliver projections. The simple wooden walls of the quiet cloud apothecary dissolved into a blinding, beautiful array of emerald and blue starlight, pulling the master and his little shadow into their first shared voyage across the infinite void. Chapter 33, The Primordial Canopy. The transition was unlike anything Ewer had ever experienced. There was no pain, no terrifying sensation of falling, only a sudden, brilliant flash of emerald light, followed by the crisp, overwhelming scent of ancient pine, damp earth, and clean, high-altitude air. When she opened her eyes, her breath caught in her small throat. They were standing on a wooden platform so massive it felt like a public plaza. Looking down, there was no ground, only a vast, endless ocean of colossal green leaves stretching out as far as the eye could see. Above them, the sky was a deep, twilight violet, illuminated not by a single sun, but by thousands of pulsing, brilliant blue stars that cast a cool, ethereal glow over the landscape. Welcome to Primal Realm 15, Su Chen said, his voice echoing softly in the vast open air. Ding! Primal Realm 15, the Primordial Canopy, threat level medium. Host's sovereign physique has adapted, unlocking oxygen-rich stamina boost and gravity calibration. Companion Ewer has been granted temporary sovereign Aegis ward, protecting her from local atmospheric pressure. Ewer walked to the edge of the platform, her small hands gripping the rough, mossy bark of what she realized was just a single, giant branch of a celestial star oak. The trunk of the tree was so thick it could have swallowed Clear Stream City whole. She looked up at Su Chen, her eyes sparkling with an awe she had never shown before. She reached for her pocket, realizing she had left her wooden slate back in the apothecary. You don't need the slate here, Su Chen smiled, pointing to her throat. Try to speak. The atmospheric pressure and the system's adaptation have healed your vocal cords for the duration of this trip. Ewer parted her lips. She took a deep breath of the starlit air. S-Master, she whispered. Her voice was quiet, slightly raspy, but it was the sweetest, clearest sound she had ever made. A radiant smile broke across her face. It's beautiful. It is, Su Chen agreed. but we have a lot of work to do, 20 years worth. Chapter 34, The Sap of the Star Oak. The first part of their task was harvesting the celestial star oak sap. The sap didn't run like normal maple syrup. It was a highly pressurized, glowing blue liquid that pulsed within the deepest veins of the giant trees like liquid starlight. To harvest it, they had to climb the sheer, vertical bark of the outer branches, tap into the correct spiritual veins, and collect the sap before it evaporated into the air. "Watch closely," Chen said. He leaped upward, his body defying gravity as he ran vertically up a trunk. He found a glowing, silver-blue knot on the bark, drew a small copper chisel, and tapped it precisely. Hiss! A stream of brilliant, glowing blue liquid sprayed out. Chen quickly held up a specialized bronze flask, capturing the liquid. System notification, 1 unit of celestial star oak sap harvested. Current progress, 1/10 million. You were watched with intense focus. She didn't have Chen's insane physical strength, but her agility was naturally high, and her quiet, patient mind made her incredibly precise. Chen handed her a smaller chisel and a set of light bronze flasks. "Start with the lower branches. If you feel tired, rest immediately. The system will keep you nourished, but the physical strain is real." Ewer nodded, her serious expression returning. "Yes, Master, I will not let you down." Within a week, Ewer was scaling the colossal branches like a young squirrel. Her small body, constantly nourished by the oxygen-rich air, and the trace medicinal elements of the sap she accidentally breathed in, began to grow stronger at an alarming rate. Companion Progress Update. Ewer has entered Chi Condensation Layer 1, naturally awakened. Chapter 35, The Sound of the Forge. By year 5 in the primordial canopy, the green platform had been transformed into a fully operational, high-altitude workshop. Chen had constructed a massive, stone and iron forge fueled by the dried, high-energy leaves of the star oaks. The heat from the forge rose into the violet sky, shimmering against the starlight. "We have harvested 5 million units of sap," Ewer reported, her voice now smooth and confident. At 13 years old, subjective primal age, she had grown taller, her posture straight and proud. "The storage vats are full." "Excellent," Chen said, his upper body bare, glistening with sweat under the forge's glow. "Now we begin the forging of the divine-grade runic bows." Forging a runic bow from star oak would require a delicate balance. The wood had to be cured in the harvested sap for exactly 3 months, then heated over the forge while being beaten with a heavy hammer to compress the spiritual fibers. Clang, clang, clang. Chen's hammer fell with rhythmic, earth-shaking force. Under his blows, the thick, stubborn oak wood began to bend, curving into the elegant, lethal arc of a longbow. Ewer sat nearby, her job being the most delicate part of the process, stringing the bows. The bowstrings were made from the spun, hardened silk of the primordial canopy spiders that lived in the highest branches. She had to weave the silk threads together, infusing each strand with her own growing spiritual chi to ensure they could withstand the immense tension of a divine-grade weapon. "Like this?" she asked, holding up a completed bow. The wood of the bow was a deep, polished ebony blue, pulsing with silver runes that glowed whenever the string was pulled. Chen inspected it, a proud look in his eyes. "Perfect. The tension is immaculate." This bow could shoot through a mountain peak if drawn by a Foundation establishment cultivator. System notification, 1x divine-grade runic bow forged. Quality excellent. Current progress, 1/1000. Chapter 36, 2 decades of growth. Years blended together in the quiet, starlit world. By year 15, Ewer was no longer the frail, silent little beggar of the East Market. She was now 20 years old in subjective time. A stunning, ethereal young woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, her hair tied back in a single, elegant braid. Her cultivation, fueled by 20 years of breathing the purest spiritual energy in existence and drinking Chen's diluted medicinal teas, had reached an incredible state. Chi Condensation Layer 9 Peak. She was a master of the bow. With a single, casual pull of a runic bow, she could launch a spiritual arrow of pure condensed chi across 5 miles of the canopy, pinning a falling leaf to a trunk without damaging the tree. "Your aim is getting faster," Chen noted, sitting on a branch, lazily peeling a spiritual fruit. "You taught me, Master," Ewer said, lowering her bow. She looked at him with an expression that had transcended simple gratitude. He was her teacher, her savior, and her entire world. She walked over and sat beside him, her long legs dangling over the edge of the branch, looking down at the endless green sea. "Sometimes I forget that Clear Stream City even exists," she murmured softly. "I feel like we've lived here forever." 20 years is a long time for a mortal, Chen said quietly, looking at his own hands. But in the grand path of cultivation, it is but a single blink of an eye. When we go back, only 72 days will have passed in the real world. Ewer rested her head against his shoulder. "As long as I am with you, Master, time does not matter." Ding! All quotas for Task 5 have been met. Remaining time, 3 years, 2 months. Overtime mode activated. Unlocking, double output and advanced material gathering. Chen grinned, tossing the fruit core into the wind. "Well then, we have 3 years of overtime left. Let's make sure we bring back enough celestial wood to rebuild the entire Eastern market, if we want to." Chapter 37, The Return of the Master and Shadow. The 20-year cycle ended. The emerald and violet starlight of Primal Realm 15 dissolved, replaced by the familiar, dusty smell of dried chamomile and the soft, creaking wood of the quiet cloud apothecary. Chen opened his eyes. The morning sun was just beginning to peek through the wooden shutters of his bedroom. He looked to his side. Ewer was standing there, her body instantly reverting to her 8-year-old form due to the system's temporal lock for the real world. Yet her eyes carried the deep, ancient calm of a 20-year cultivator. She looked down at her small, childish hands, then up at Chen, a soft, silent smile on her face. She didn't need her slate anymore. They had lived together for 20 years. They could read each other's thoughts with a single glance. "Welcome back to the mortal world, little assistant," Chen whispered, his voice warm. "It is good to be back, Master," she whispered back, her voice once again silent to the outside world but perfectly clear to his divine sense. Ding! Task 5 successfully completed. Evaluating performance. Quality. Perfect. 1,500,000 extra sap units collected. 350 extra divine bows forged during overtime. Distributing rewards to host's private stash. Unlocking next task in 3 months. Chen opened his shop doors, letting the fresh, cool spring air of Clear Stream City sweep through the dusty room. The Eastern market was bustling. The memory of the Iron Blood sect had faded, replaced by the chaotic, loud chatter of mortal merchants selling fresh fish and spring vegetables. But as Chen sat back down in his rocking chair, his divine sense, now incredibly vast after his breakthrough to the Foundation establishment realm and 20 years of mental cultivation, suddenly caught a strange, heavy vibration in the spiritual chi of the region. A massive caravan of luxurious, golden-trimmed carriages was currently entering the city gates. They did not carry merchants. They carried cultivators, dozens of them, all dressed in the elegant, white-and-gold robes of the Azure Mist sect's inner court. At the head of the caravan, riding a magnificent white spiritual crane, was a young woman with a cold, arrogant face, a silver sword strapped to her waist. Chen's eyes narrowed slightly as he recognized her aura. It was Lin Zhu, his former fiancée, the genius disciple who had cast him out of the sect 5 years ago, and she was heading directly toward the Eastern market. Chapter 38, The Reunion at the East Market. The majestic white crane glided down, its massive wings kicking up a gust of wind that scattered loose straw and dust across the East Market. The mortal merchants scrambled backward in a mixture of awe and terror, bowing their heads to the stone ground as the white-and-gold-clad cultivators dismounted their carriages. Lin Zhu stepped down from her crane, her expression as cold and pristine as the glaciers of the Azure Mist sect's peaks. At 19, she had already reached the late stages of the Qi condensation realm, a true genius destined for the Foundation establishment stage within the year. "Sister Lin, this place is filthy," a handsome young male disciple beside her muttered, holding a silk handkerchief to his nose. "Why must we establish our temporary command outpost in the slums of the East Market? The geographical array of Clear Stream City has its weakest node here," Lin Zhu replied, her voice crisp and devoid of emotion. The Southern Demon Sect's vanguard is advancing through the Blackwood Forest. If they strike, they will target this sector first. We set up here." As she scanned the street, her eyes suddenly froze. Directly across from the plaza stood a modest, slightly weathered shop with a wooden sign, the Quiet Cloud Apothecary. Sitting in a creaking wicker rocking chair by the door was a young man in a plain scholar's robe, lazily holding a warm cup of tea. Next to him, a small, neat girl with 2 hair buns was silently sweeping the porch with a bamboo broom. Lin Zhu's breath hitched slightly. "Su Chen," she murmured. The disciples around her paused. The handsome male disciple, whose name was Zhao Feng, looked toward the apothecary with a frown. "Sister Lin, do you know this mortal waste?" "He is not a mortal," Lin Zhu said coldly, though a trace of complex emotion flickered in her eyes. "He was once a disciple of our outer court." She walked forward, her pristine white boots stepping over the muddy puddles of the street. The inner court disciples followed her, their handguards clinking against their swords, drawing the anxious stares of the entire market. Chapter 39, The Condescension of the Clouds. Su Chen didn't stand up. He merely took a slow sip of his tea, his rocking chair continuing its rhythmic creak-creak. Beside him, Ewer didn't stop sweeping, but her grip on the bamboo broom tightened by a fraction of a millimeter. To anyone else, she was just a small, hardworking assistant. But to Su Chen, her internal golden chi was already humming like a drawn bowstring. "Peace, Ewer," Su Chen communicated silently through their shared soul bond. "Let them play their part." "Su Chen," Lin Zhu spoke, stopping 5 paces from the counter. She looked down at him, her eyes sweeping over his suppressed chi condensation layer 5 aura. A silent sigh of pity escaped her lips. "It has been 5 years, you have not progressed much." "Ah, junior sister Lin," Su Chen smiled, his tone easy and polite, completely lacking the nervous deference she expected. "Actually, it's shopkeeper Su now. Clear Stream City has good air and the tea is cheap. I can't complain." Zhao Feng stepped forward, sneering as he looked at the simple shelves of low-grade, blood-stopping herbs. "Sister Lin, is this the trash who was stripped of his engagement to you? Chi condensation layer 5 at his age. He truly is a parasite. To think he occupies a prime spot near our defensive node." "Mind your tongue, Zhao Feng," Lin Zhu said, though her voice lacked any real anger. She looked back at Su Chen, her face returning to its icy, detached mask. "Su Chen, the region is no longer safe. The Southern Demon Sect is raiding the border. We are requisitioning this street for the sect's defensive array. Pack up your things and leave the city by tonight." "Leave?" Su Chen tilted his head, looking amused. "But my lease runs until the end of the year, junior sister, and moving is such a hassle." "This is an order of the Azure Mist Sect," Zhao Feng barked, resting his hand on the hilt of his silver sword. "A weakling like you has no right to bargain. Leave, or we will clear this shop by force." Ewer suddenly stopped sweeping. She stepped in front of Su Chen's rocking chair, her tiny body shielding his legs. She didn't speak, abiding by her role as a mute, but her dark, intense eyes locked onto Zhao Feng's face with a cold, piercing sharpness that made the proud inner court disciple instinctively step back half a pace. Zhao Feng felt a sudden, inexplicable shiver run down his spine. He looked at the 8-year-old girl, bewildered by his own reaction. "What is wrong with me? Frightened by a mortal child?" "Enough," Lin Zhu cut in, waving her hand. She threw a small pouch onto the wooden counter. It clinked with the heavy sound of spirit stones. "There are 50 low-grade spirit stones here, more than enough to buy 10 such shops in the outer provinces. Su Chen, I do this out of respect for our family's past relations. Do not seek your own death." Without waiting for his response, she turned her back, her white robes billowing as she walked toward the large municipal building across the plaza. "Move out by sunset, trash," Zhao Feng spit, glaring at Ewer one last time before following Lin Zhu. Su Chen looked at the pouch of 50 low-grade spirit stones on the counter, then at the retreating backs of the arrogant geniuses. He let out a soft, amused chuckle. 50 low-grade stones," he murmured to Ewer. "That's barely enough to buy a single leaf of our star oak trees, isn't it?" Ewer turned to him, her eyes soft and questioning. "Master, should I kill them tonight?" her gaze asked with absolute seriousness. Su Chen laughed, reaching out to gently pat her neat hair buns. "No need, little shadow. Let's see what kind of demon sect is coming first. If they break our windows, then we'll talk about compensation." Chapter 40, The Gathering Storm. Night fell over Clear Stream City, accompanied by a heavy, unnatural black fog that rolled in from the surrounding mountains. The lively chatter of the East Market was completely dead. Every door was bolted, and every window was shuttered. Across the street, the municipal building was ablaze with spiritual light. Lin Zhu and her fellow disciples had erected a glowing, pale blue barrier, the Azure Flow Array, to protect their command post. Inside the quiet, dark bedroom of the Quiet Cloud Apothecary, Chen sat cross-legged. He wasn't meditating. He was casually browsing through his system's upgraded interface. System notification, 3 months until Task 6. Host's current physical state, stable. Companion Ewer state, stable. Ewer, Chen called out softly. The shadow in the corner of his room shifted, and Ewer stepped out of the darkness. In her hands, she held her divine-grade runic bow. In the dark room, the bow's deep ebony blue wood pulsed with a faint, breathing silver light, perfectly reflecting her peak chi condensation aura. "The wind has changed, Master," she whispered, her voice melodious and calm. "There is the smell of blood and rotten iron coming from the northern wall." "Yes," Chen nodded, his divine sense easily penetrating the city walls. "The city guards are already dead. The demon sect cultivators bypass the main gates. They are using shadow-stepping techniques." Suddenly, a high-pitched, agonizing scream shattered the silence of the night. Boom! A massive explosion of dark, crimson energy rocked the northern sector of the East Market. The pale blue defensive barrier erected by the Azure Mist disciples flared violently, cracking like cheap glass under the impact of a massive, bloody spear launched from the fog. "The Crimson Blood Spear," Lin Zhu's voice echoed across the plaza, sharp and filled with sudden alarm. "Form the sword array. The enemy has a Foundation establishment leader." Chapter 41, The Siege of the East Market. Through the gaps in the wooden shutters of the apothecary, Ewer watched the battle unfold. Dozens of rogue cultivators dressed in tattered, bone-adorned black robes poured out of the dark fog like starved locusts. They carried jagged curved blades, their bodies radiating a foul, metallic stench of refined blood. At the center of the plaza, Lin Zhu was a blur of silver light. Her swordplay was elegant and precise, cold chi radiating from her blade as she froze and shattered 3 charging demon disciples in a single sweeping arc. "Hold the line," she commanded, her face pale but determined. But the Azure Mist disciples were young and inexperienced. Under the chaotic, ruthless onslaught of the demon sect, their formation was rapidly crumbling. "Ah!" Zhao Feng screamed as a dark, venomous dart pierced his thigh, sending him crashing to the muddy ground, his face turning an unhealthily dark shade of purple. "Jingzhu," a raspy, terrifying voice boomed from the sky. Floating above the plaza, riding a cloud of roiling black smoke, was an old man with sunken cheeks and long, skeletal fingers. His eyes glowed with a sick yellow light, a true Foundation establishment Layer 2 demon cultivator. "You minor disciples of the Azure Mist sect think you can block my corpse-devouring path," the elder laughed, his skeletal hand raising a massive, crimson-wrapped staff. "Your blood will make excellent fodder for my skull banners." He pointed his staff downward. A massive, roaring dragon made of condensed, boiling blood materialized in the air, its jaws opening wide as it plunged directly toward the exhausted Lin Zhu. Lin Zhu looked up, her silver sword trembling. She had exhausted her spiritual chi defending her junior brothers. Looking at the descending blood dragon, her eyes filled with a bitter, cold despair. "Is this where I die? In a filthy mortal market, killed by a rogue demon?" Chapter 42, The Silver Arrow. Inside the pitch-black apothecary, Chen quietly stood behind Ewer, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "Take the shot, Ewer," he whispered. "Use the 3rd runic vein." Ewer nodded silently. She lifted the massive, elegant runic bow, her small fingers gripping the spun spider silk string. She didn't use a physical arrow. As she pulled the string back to her ear, the silver-blue runes on the bow flared, drawing the ambient spiritual energy of the room into a single, blindingly bright silver shaft of light. The air in the room grew cold, smelling of pure, starlit ozone. She aimed through a tiny, pre-carved knothole in the shop's wooden wall. Her target was 500 feet away, moving through the chaotic sky. She released her grip. Shing. There was no loud explosion. only a sharp musical hum that vibrated through the very souls of everyone in the plaza. A beam of pristine, silver starlight shot out from the dark, dilapidated apothecary. It cut through the black fog like a hot knife through grease, leaving a perfectly round, clean tunnel of empty air in its wake. The descending blood dragon didn't even have time to roar before the silver beam pierced its skull, instantly dissolving the boiling crimson energy into a harmless shower of warm spring rain. "What?" the demon elder gasped, his yellow eyes widening in absolute horror as he felt the sheer, world-erasing power of the arrow. "Who?" Before he could even turn his head toward the source, the silver beam pierced his chest. Zap! The elder's body froze. The silver runes from the arrow rapidly spread across his skin like a glowing spider web. In less than half a breath, his skeletal frame, his blood staff, and his entire core shattered into a million sparkling, silent particles of starlight, drifting harmlessly down onto the muddy street. A Foundation establishment elder, vaporized in a single silent breath. Chapter 43, The Unfathomable Night. The silence that followed was absolute. The remaining demon sect disciples stared at the empty sky where their elder had just been floating. The sheer, overwhelming pressure of the residual starlight chi in the air was so immense that their knees buckled, their weapons clattering to the wet stones. "Who?" Linzu whispered, her knees trembling as she stared at the glowing silver mist that was slowly dissolving the dark fog. "What senior is residing here?" She knew the power of the Azure Mist sect's elders. Even their peak Foundation establishment hall masters could not have erased an elder so cleanly, so silently, without causing a single ripple of destructive shockwave to the surrounding mortal buildings. This was the work of an absolute, peerless master. "Retreat, retreat!" a demon disciple screamed, his voice cracking with terror. The raiders scrambled backward into the fog, fleeing the city like whipped dogs, completely forgetting about their grand invasion. Linzu ignored them. Her eyes were locked onto the path the silver arrow had traveled. She traced the clean, circular tunnel cut through the fog, her gaze moving lower and lower, until it stopped directly at the weathered wooden wall of the quiet cloud apothecary. Her heart leaped into her throat. "Sister Lin," Zhao Feng groaned from the ground, his face still purple. "The poison, help." "Quiet," Linzu hissed. She walked forward, her steps slow, her hand trembling as she approached the simple wooden door of the apothecary. She knelt down in the mud, bowing her head deeply. "Azure Mist Sect disciple Linzu, representing the sect, thanks the hidden senior for saving our lives," she called out, her voice filled with a reverence she had never shown to anyone in her life. "May I ask if the senior would allow this disciple to pay her respects?" The silence of the night stretched. Then the wooden door creaked open. Chapter 44, Just an Apothecary. Linzu's breath caught. She raised her head, expecting to see an ancient, white-bearded immortal dressed in starlight robes. Instead, stepping out of the doorway was Chen. He was holding a broom in his hand, looking tiredly at the shattered stone tiles of the plaza and the messy puddles of blood. Beside him, the little mute girl Ewer was holding a small wooden bucket, her face completely blank. "Junior Sister Lin," Chen sighed, scratching his neck. "Do you have any idea how much it costs to repair these stone tiles? And your battle has completely ruined the quiet atmosphere of my shop." Linzu blinked, her mind momentarily short-circuiting. "Chen, where? Where is the senior who was just inside?" "Senior?" Chen looked confused. He turned his head back into the dark, empty shop, then looked back at her. "There's no one here but me and Ewer. We were hiding under the bed the whole time. Truly, the demon cultivators are terrifying." "That's impossible." Zhao Feng dragged himself forward, clutching his poison leg. "That arrow, it came directly from your shop. You must be hiding him." "Ah, the arrow?" Chen clapped his hands as if suddenly remembering. "Right. Before the battle started, an old, sloppy Taoist priest came in to buy some dry ginger. He looked quite annoyed by the noise outside. He drew a quick symbol on our wall, mumbled something about ruining his tea time, and then, well, he just vanished. The arrow shot out right after." Linzu's eyes widened. A teleporting, spell-drawing expert who buys dry ginger in a mortal market. It made perfect sense. Peerless eccentrics often disguised themselves as commoners, traveling the mortal world to temper their Tao hearts. Where did he go?" Lin Zhu asked urgently, her eyes scanning the dark streets. I have no idea, Su Chen shrugged, leaning on his broom. But he did leave a mess. Anyway, junior sister Lin, about those 50 spirit stones you left on my counter earlier. Lin Zhu quickly stood up, her face flushing with a mixture of embarrassment and respect. The spirit stones are yours, shopkeeper Su. Consider it compensation for the disturbance. We will clear the plaza immediately. She turned to her remaining disciples, her voice returning to its commanding tone. Pack up the camp. We are moving our outpost to the southern gate. Do not disturb the peace of this area any longer. She gave the quiet cloud apothecary one last, lingering look of deep awe, completely convinced that the hidden expert was still watching over the shop from some pocket dimension. As the cultivators hurriedly dragged their wounded away, Su Chen turned back into his shop, quietly closing the door against the cool night air. Ewer set her wooden bucket down, her serious face breaking into a silent, amused smile. Well, Su Chen chuckled, tossing his broom into the corner. That's one way to get 50 free spirit stones. Now, Ewer, we have 3 months before our next task. Let's brew some wine and enjoy the peace while it lasts.